Hi Jim, how are you going today?
Pretty good, Deb, and you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I'm
That's
really good. So it's interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of business owners, I think, focus on profit. But then as they're growing their business, they find that actually cash flow gives them more dramas. So I'm wondering if you could make some comments around the difference between cash flow and profitability.
I suppose you'd really have to start with making sure that people understand what profit is.
Okay, cool.
So profit is what's left over after you've taken all the money that the business has earned and the expenses that have been incurred in earning that income. What is left over is the profit.
And I guess there's no point in working if you're not making a profit, right?
No, certainly not worthwhile. Everybody goes into business, like I ask people if they go into business, they don't go into business to work hard and earn less than they did as an employee. They go into business to make that profit, that elusive profit.
Yeah, right.
But the issue is, of course, though, that just because the business is making a profit, it doesn't actually mean that people are actually taking money home. And this is where the issue is. A lot of people will go into business and they may make a profit, but because they're not controlling the cash flow of the business, they find that, and they're complaining, they're saying, well, look, I actually used to take home more when I was working as an employee, and I used to work less than what I'm doing now as a business owner, and that's because of cash flow.
So that's sort of foreign to me, because I think, well, if I'm earning, the business is profitable, there should be money there. So how come cash flow, what is it about cash flow that means then that there isn't actually any money in the bank?
All right, so if we've looked at it where profit is measuring expenses and income and what's left over a given period of time, like say for instance, we always work on a financial year.
Yeah.
Okay, so you might actually be able to work out after all your income and expenses that you've made a profit of $100,000 in a year. Okay, but if people will equate that to sort of saying, well, where's my $100,000? It's not sitting in the bank. And one would say, well, the layman would be saying, well, the $100,000 needs to be in my bank account because I made a $100,000 profit. And this is where they get upset about maybe having to pay tax. And a lot of the things that people don't consider is, in order to earn that profit, they may have had to purchase equipment.
Right.
Okay, now, equipment sitting on the balance sheet, it's not considered to be an expense.
Right.
Okay. Oh, there's some changes now, but typically speaking, it's not considered to be an expense in the business. So, therefore, only depreciation would be claimed, which is a portion. So, if you've spent $50,000 on a piece of equipment, that may only equate to a $5,000 tax deduction in the current year, but you've still got to pay tax on the $45,000 that the business has generated to allow you to have that $50,000.
Right.
So, when you're paying tax on it, but the money's not in your bank account, well, that's cash flow.
Right. So that's where the problem comes. All right.
And the other thing as well is people will often make the mistake of, well, I've made a profit but there's no money in the bank, and they don't consider how the money flows into the business and out of the business. Now, profit, we've said, is matching up income and expenses, but cash flow is a different beast altogether. Cash flow is where you actually may make a sale today which counts towards your profit, but when do you receive the money for that sale? So you may have incurred all of the expenses necessary to make that sale already, or you may have to pay for them in 5 days' time or 10 days' time. Like say, for instance, you purchased a computer or an iPhone and you sold it, your supplier may be requiring you to pay for that computer or iPhone on delivery. So you've already parted with that money. You sell it to a client who takes 30 days or 60 days to pay you, well then you've got that hole in your cash flow where you're funding somebody else's phone. Okay, and this is where a lot of businesses will encounter problems.
And I guess as the business grows, those holes get bigger. Is that potentially bigger?
Incredibly. With a small business, we're talking always smaller numbers. So if you've got yourself only as the employee, or not even as an employee but just as a sole trader, you only have to worry about your own wages. Once you actually start putting on additional people, which would indicate then the overall expenses of the business are going up, that grows exponentially. So you have to be mindful that not only do you have to have the cash flow to support paying your employees and paying all the obligations that go with that, and typically where a lot of people fall over is though they will pay their employees the net amount before tax, they withhold the tax. And then when it comes time to actually paying the tax that they've withheld from the employees' wages, they've already spent that money because they needed it in their cash flow. Right. And that's when problems start to escalate. Okay. And typically what you find is, unless it's managed, it'll snowball. Right. So one debt will build on top of another till they get to a situation where they haven't got enough cash in the business, or the collections aren't happening quick enough to be able to support how the expenses are falling due.
And is that the commonest reason is people go out of business? Is that one of the common?
It's certainly one of the main reasons, cash flow. So one of the things that people are never really quite aware of is what is the working capital that a business requires. Okay. So working capital, put fairly simply, is how much money do you have to have in the bank at any point in time to make sure that you can meet all of the expenses of the business on an ongoing basis, which will match up with how money's flowing into the business. So when you've sold that iPhone or that computer and you know that you're going to get paid in 30 days or 60 days, and you always allow for the worst because people are always going to drag things out, you've got to say, well, I've got to be meeting my obligations, so how much surplus am I going to need to have in my bank all the time to make sure that I don't fall in a situation where I can't meet my own debts. Okay, and that's an exercise in itself, and a lot of businesses don't get that right.
Don't get that right. So having identified that cash flow is one of the biggest problems for business, what can a business owner do to make sure that they don't have a problem with cash flow through a year?
Okay, they probably need to, or they definitely have to sit down and actually prepare a budget for the year.
Right, and I think of a budget as just, expenses. There's a lot to a budget, right? There is.
The budget needs to consider how income is going to flow into the business and how much income is going to be flowing in, and when it's going to be flowing in, and what activities are going to be undertaken by the business owner to increase the income coming in, because it doesn't happen naturally. You hang out a shingle on the door and simply expect things to happen.
So you're talking sales and marketing, you're talking additional team?
You're talking everything. You might have to have a spend on marketing. You might have to engage a web designer, a marketing agency, whatever, to actually lift the profile of your business to try to. It's a competitive market out there, so whatever you're doing, you've got to try to say, all right, well, I have a limited amount of funds, and how am I going to spend those funds in order to try to increase my bottom line? Yeah. Okay, so when you're looking at that, you can actually, well, what we always do is we'll always sort of say, at least aim for a 12-month budget to sort of say, know what's going to be happening in that financial year. Yeah. Because there's many times that we've sat down and had that exercise of a budgeting exercise, and the actual outcome from what the client wants to do is not going to deliver the result that they want.
So they might not make the profit that they
want. No, 100%. Right. So isn't it great to be able to sort of say, I've looked for 12 months down the track, and if I do what I'm planning on doing, I'm going to lose money, or I'm not going to make the money that I want. So then you could sort of say, all right, what do I need to change now? Or what do I need to change in 6 months' time to make sure that I get the outcome that we need?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So once you've done that, then that's to give you a profit and loss. Yeah. Okay. Then you've got to consider then there's cash flow associated with it as well. So you might be able to, doing that budget, you've got to be able to identify how the money's going to flow in and out of the business and the timing of that in order to try to determine if there's going to be any holes in your cash flow. So if you know that by doing a proper three-way budget, which is basically a profit and loss, a cash flow and a balance sheet projection, if you know that in 6 months' time you're going to have a $20,000 hole or a $50,000 hole, it might give you the opportunity now to sort of say, well, let's see if we can get the funding for that now. Yeah, right. So if you have to approach the bank to get an overdraft or whatever, it's far easier to get an overdraft when you don't need it than when you do need it. Yeah, right. So if you could sort of say, all right, well, this is what we're expecting, and we're going to need some additional funding to cover us for a period of 3 months for this much, well, certainly you're far more prepared for it.
Yeah, right.
Rather than sort of waiting for an accident to happen.
That makes a huge amount of sense. You're going into the journey prepared, right?
Yeah.
So budgeting is one way that you can manage cash flow. Is there any other things that people need to consider to keep on top of cash flow?
Definitely. Cash flow is one of those things that people often get too busy to think about.
Okay.
But managing how you invoice to start with. We speak to so many people that they say, hey, look, I'll invoice once every fortnight because I'm too busy.
Yeah.
So effectively what you've done is if you've invoiced 2 weeks after you've done the job, then you're going to get waiting another 30 days to get paid at best. So you're sort of saying you're carrying the cost of that job for 45 days.
Yeah.
And if you do that too many times, you're going to have a problem.
Especially because if you've got big outgoings and a long time between and the business is growing, there's more of those, all of a sudden that can become a big amount of money, right?
Yeah. And then also on the flip side of it is collection of money.
Right.
So a lot of people say, well, I'm invoicing, but I'm too busy to collect. So unless you've actually got your eye on how the money's coming into the business, it's almost as important as how you're spending the money.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so if you've done the work, you've got to have the right procedures around and systematised procedures around how you go about collecting, how you go about invoicing, because they've all got to happen quickly.
Yes.
You know, it's because everybody's trying to use everybody else's money, so the best thing is to have the money in your account rather than the person that you've done the work for.
Where does ATB provide a service like this for their clients?
Well, we do go through the process of a detailed budget, cash flow and projected balance sheet.
Yeah.
And once that's done, it's always critical to, if you prepare that and you don't measure how you're going against what you said you were going to do, it's quite pointless.
Right.
I once heard a speaker give a talk, and he said that when a pilot takes off from Sydney and they're flying with a destination of England, they don't just sort of say, well, I'm going to England, it's a straight line and that's it. What they're doing is they're constantly monitoring how they're going, and they're making corrections along the way in order to get themselves, and they do. They land all the time. They will hit England. They will get to their destination. And why that is because they're always constantly measuring and adjusting to keep them on course.
As the wind changes.
Exactly. And a business is no different. If you've prepared a budget and you say, well, look, this is where I want to get to in 12 months' time, and if you then are constantly measuring and monitoring how you're going in comparison to where you said you wanted to be, you will get to where you wanted to get to.
So it's about setting a target and then working and constantly working on your business.
100%. It's working on your business, in your business, however you want to do it, but it's concentrating on looking inwards as opposed to only just looking at producing and providing a service or providing goods. You've always got to be looking at your own house and keeping that in order.
Beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.